So Robin is a chef, a sommelier, a forager, and the owner of Swallowtail, a foraging and culinary tour company and supper club based technically in Vancouver, but I'm pretty sure you kind of go everywhere. So Robin has spent a lifetime harvesting and cooking in British Columbia, influenced first by her mother and her grandmother, then by global chefs under whom she mentored. Her passion is to dive into the seasonal flora and fungi found in the forests and the oceans around her, and share her amassed knowledge with her guests who join her on her tours. Robin's Secret Supper Club is not so secret anymore, I believe, having been featured on Food Network's World's Weirdest Restaurants. She has appeared in numerous news pieces by the CBC, National Post, Globe and Mail, Huffington Post, and others. And so she's definitely a gastronomical foraging leader on the West Coast. And we're very excited to have her here. So,
thank you.
Yay. So while I get this video started, maybe you can just kind of share with people where you are, what you're doing out there.
Yeah. So the reason I'm in the forest is I spend half my time on Galliano Island near Vancouver. That's where I forage for a lot of my seaweed and urchin and mushrooms as well. Last week I found some morels, some black morels growing around our cabin. So I picked those and those were delicious, of course. But yeah, the porcinis that I'm making in the video today are one of my favorites. And a great thing about porcini is that they dehydrate really well. I'm already getting into cooking. Maybe I should stop. But yeah, a lot of those I pick in fall as well. So I'll pick in fall, I'll slice them quite thin and I'll dry them. And they are one of the mushrooms that are almost better dehydrated because it really concentrates the flavor. So then I use them in sauces and the like that you'll see in a second in the video coming up. So yeah, we can talk about it after the video.
Alrighty. Well, I got the video ready here. So without further ado, I'll just do a little screen share here and we'll get going.
It's very exciting because this is a porcini. Look at that beauty. It's a perfect size. You want them to be a bit small because then they'll be firm. You can see a slug or something has been sort of nibbling a little bit on him, but this is just perfect for picking. Awesome. But yeah, this is one of my favorite right here. Beautiful little miner's lettuce.
So I'm going to use 1.5 cups of chicken stock. You can use vegetable stock if you want, or dashi, or whatever flavoring you want as far as the soup base. I'm just going to whip this up, boil it, and then turn it off the heat. So I'm going to take, I've got my unit set to grams right now. I want it set to ounces. And I'm going to take my spring porcini that I've dried and I'm going to add it until I get to 1 ounce. So dried porcini. You can use any dried mushroom actually for this recipe, but spring porcini are delicious. Oops, one too many. Oh, that's so hard to get the number right sometimes. Close enough. If you don't have, let's say a scale, then you want about a cup of, or a big handful of dried mushrooms. It's about equivalent. So I've thrown my porcini in and I'm just gonna let it sit. The heat is off for 20 minutes. So once this is sat for 20 minutes, just to rehydrate. So this is my porcini, of course. I'm just going to take them and wring them out. Oops, I'm wringing them out into the wrong bowl. Just squeeze them until they have no more liquid left. And then for porcinis especially, they tend to be a bit sandy. So what I'm going to do is strain these. So I just have a coffee filter in a strainer. And I'm going to pour the porcini through, just to make sure that there's no grit in there. With other mushrooms, you don't need to worry about them being sandy, but porcini can be a bit dirty depending on where you harvested them. Great. I'm just squishing them out by hand to speed it up. The sand tends to pool in the bottom of this coffee filter, so just sort of speeds it up. And like I said, you don't have to do this for any mushroom that isn't porcini or very dirty. If you don't have a coffee filter, you can also just slowly pour the jus and just like stop at the last second so that there's like a little bit of grit left there. So I'm going to put my porcini broth back into the pot, and then I'm going to reduce it down to make the sauce. So what I'm doing here is I'm just whisking in a teaspoon of flour, and that'll add to the thickening of the porcini jus. So just make sure that there's no lumps. You just got to whisk it really, really well. You could even add it to a little bit less water to start if you're worried about it clumping, because no one wants a lumpy sauce, right? So yeah, so you just whip that up, and then I'm going to add it back to the boiling stock and boil it to thicken. I'm just gonna bring that to a boil now that I've put my flour paste into the pot, and that'll thicken it. So this is my boiling and thickening mushroom jus, which is great, like mushroom gravy. So you're just gonna reduce this down until it's the thickness that you want. I'm also gonna add a little bit of pepper and salt to taste at the end. Another fun thing to add is juniper berries. Really, really delicious. You can just crush these up in a mortar and pestle and add them to your jus. Fill a big pot of boiling water. Boil the water and salt it to taste. So you want it to taste like the sea. So I've thrown in my nettle pasta. If you have regular pasta, that's good too. Just make sure you cook it just to al dente. So not too soggy. I hate soggy noodles. So this is about 4 to 5 minutes. I just taste it, and then I'm going to take it out and add my sauces. Stinging nettles is a great thing to harvest in spring along with your spring porcinis. There's my thickening sauce right there. Yeah, it's just a taste of spring in the Pacific Northwest. Stinging nettles. If you want to learn more about harvesting stinging nettles and other spring things, you can take my online foraging courses or come out for an infield trip with me sometime. That would be fun. Okay, let's finish this meal. While I'm waiting for my pasta to cook, I'm just going to you can put just butter into the dish, but I'm going to put a little bit of a white wine cream sauce that I already had made. Butter is excellent, or olive oil you can put in, and that's just so when you put the pasta in, when it's cooked, you toss it to make sure it doesn't stick. So that's just a rough chop, and you'll add this mushroom into your pasta after it's done. Alright, going in the bowl. So here is my pasta. Creamy, tasty. Again, butter is just as good. Or olive oil. And then my sauce. So I'm just going to drizzle some of the porcini sauce over it. And it's a nice meaty mushroom that's delicious. Especially when you pick it yourself, right? And then just a bit of Parmesan over the top. Nothing gets better than that. And just to be gratuitous, I'm going to add even more porcini sauce. Bon appetit! So that's it. That's my spring mushroom recipe for you. You can try this with morels or lots of different spring mushrooms, or even oyster mushrooms. But porcini is one of my favorite. Spring porcinis come up in Pacific Northwest around this time of year, so they're one of the best to go pick. And then in fall, of course, there's more porcinis, and then you can dry them and have a lot of fun with them in many, many different dishes.
So enjoy. And if you want to check out my website for more recipes, it's swallowtail.ca. All right, I forgot to add the actual mushrooms in, because that's just the things you forget as a chef. So there's my diced mushroom added on top with a little bit of beautiful miner's lettuce, which is another spring forageable that is delicious at this time of year.
All right, we're back.
Hello.
You're Robin. So
I saw one question.
Sorry?
I said I saw one question I can answer.
Yes. Do you ever use dehydrated mushrooms to start?
So no, you wouldn't have to. With porcini, if you picked up a fresh porcini and you slice it up and you put it in water to make a sauce, it's going to turn into a slimy mess. So one thing about porcini in particular, like I find each mushroom has its own particular way you have to cook it. If you had morels or mushrooms that are a bit more firm, then you can slice it up and it'll work well. But with porcini specifically, I would use dehydrated for this recipe. Because porcini are, of all mushrooms, they're the most, they have the most water content. They're like little sponges, right? So a lot of people will pick a porcini for the first time in the forest, go home, slice it up, fry it in butter, because you think like frying it in butter is how all mushrooms should be cooked, and it'll look disgusting and you won't like porcinis. So with porcini for this recipe, dehydrated. The other thing that I would say is if you have a fresh button porcini, you can slice those up and grill them on high heat in a dry pan with no oil. And they work well then because they'll firm up. The mushroom will firm up and it won't get slimy, sort of thing, right? So yeah, not for this recipe with porcinis, but with other mushrooms you could use shiitake, for example, because they're nice and firm. So you could slice those up, boil them in water or simmer them in water to extract the flavor. But it works. This recipe works best for porcini, dry porcini, and you can buy that in the store too. You don't have to pick your own. You can buy it, anywhere in North America. So that makes the recipe very accessible.
There's a kind of two questions on the same kind of topic here, which is essentially whether the drying and rehydrating is the cooking of the mushroom for this recipe.
Yeah, yes, exactly. For this recipe, yeah, I would dehydrate them first, or you can just throw them. That's the thing, is you don't need a dehydrator. You can just slice them thin and throw them on a grate in the oven on low heat, sort of thing, and that firm them up, right? Or like I said, in a dry pan, that's another way to do it. You can slice them up, fry them in a dry pan to sort of firm them up, and then work from there. But generally, yeah, when you dehydrate them, they really the texture is better.
So for this we use porcini, and I suppose you use the porcini because it gives you kind of that rich, almost kind of like a beefy flavor in a way, kind of a vegetarian beefy flavor.
Yep.
Are there like other mushrooms or items that you can kind of use that, if you can't get your hands on porcini, would any dried mushroom kind of work?
Yeah, like honestly, I love going to in our area, there's stores like TNT, like Asian grocery stores have a lot of variety of dried mushrooms, and shiitake would work perfectly, right? So you can use that for sure. Yeah, and other mushrooms, there's so many different mushrooms, but lobster mushrooms would be great too. Dehydrated lobster mushrooms. I heard on the last chef had some questions about lobster mushrooms, because we have tons of lobster mushrooms out here. So that's another one that dehydrates really well and holds its firmness, and that would be delicious in this recipe. And yeah, for puffballs, depends on what type of puffball you're talking about. Clavadia buniana, so that's the giant Western puffball that we have around here. East Coast, I think there's a giant puffball as well. Those ones, I actually eat them raw. I like them. There was a recipe when I was cooking in Italy where they would just peel the mushrooms raw. So have these really thin slices of mushrooms and then add olive oil, salt, and oregano and mint, and a little bit of lemon. And that was like a salad. And it was one of the best dishes I've ever tried in my life. They were using porcini there too. But puffballs, you could try that with puffballs, because I find that puffballs are a bit of a flavor repulsor in that they don't, like other mushrooms, they absorb flavor. Puffballs, because of their texture, they're a bit like, they don't want to absorb flavor. For me, I don't know. I haven't cooked with puffballs too often. I think they're more of an East Coast thing, but yeah.
Amazing. I've never thought about eating them raw, though I don't really eat many wild mushrooms raw. So
yeah, that's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's generally against the recommended advice, but for sure there's definitely times when it's possible. I mean, for my puffballs, go ahead.
Like matsutake, traditionally in Japan, like, yeah, you eat matsutake raw, right? So and porcini raw as well. I find with raw mushrooms, humans don't digest raw mushrooms easily. So I think for nutritional content and like getting your body getting the nutrition out of the mushroom, it's better to cook them. But sometimes there's some mushrooms that are actually delicious raw. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, with my puffballs, especially the larger ones. So on the East Coast, it's Calvatia gigantea, giant puffball. And I just dry it up and use it. I just use I turn it into a powder, and I just use it as essentially the quickest cream of mushroom soup recipe you can come up with. Essentially just heat up some milk or cream and add in your puffball powder, and you pretty much have a cream of mushroom soup. Yeah, pretty easy. I noticed in the video that you made the a nettle pasta recipe. There were some people who asked questions whether or not we were going to be getting the recipes and whatnot. So we will be sending out some recipes on what's been made today from all the chefs to the attendees. But yeah, I noticed that you had a nettle pasta in there, and then you have kind of a cookbook. Do you have any more information on this cookbook?
Yeah, this elusive cookbook. So it's been in the works for a while, and the publisher, I think, is going to release it this fall. So that's, it's a coastal foraging cookbook. So the nettle pasta is definitely in there, as well as the mushroom recipe. But yeah, I'm happy to write it out for people, because the nettle pasta, I can give you a quick preamble on it. It's very simple. All you do is you pick your nettles with gloves on, of course, because the stings are burny. Well, for me anyway, not for everybody. And then what I'll do is I'll blanch my stinging nettles, I'll wring them out, and then I put them in a really good food processor. So just like, but even like a small handful of them into a food processor, and zip them until they're quite blended, and then add my flour to that. So whatever recipe you're using to make your handmade pasta, you would add the flour to that, and then blend it super, super well so there's no fiber left, because then you won't be able to cut your pasta properly if there's any fibers left. So you blend that up in a food processor. You add your eggs, again, with whatever pasta recipe you're using. Blend that up, knead it, cut it. That's it. So it's like, you can use it, like look for a recipe for spinach pasta, and then just use the nettles instead.
Interesting. We received a question from Elizabeth. Technically, it's aimed at me on how to rehydrate the puffball powder. I mean, I've never had an issue with rehydrating it, honestly. Heat up the milk, and then just kind of whisk it in, kind of like how Robin was whisking in the regular flour there in her recipe. That's pretty much what I do with the puffball powder. So, anything that's going to, whether it be flour or cornstarch or puffball powder, I mean, these things are essentially thickeners. So, you want to start with a small amount so you don't get the lumps, and then work them into whatever. I also added in, if I'm doing a stew, for example, a lot of people like to add some mushrooms and whatnot into their stews. And, I wouldn't be absurd for me to add a couple of tablespoons. I do stay on the side of caution with regards to how much I put in, because I find that it can be quite potent when added in. So I tend to do it, just really a tablespoon at a time to make sure that I'm not adding, it's not as flavorless as flour. Let's put it that way. So, okay,
That's
excellent.
I'll have to try that. We don't, like I said, we have these little small puffballs on the West Coast.
Yeah.
They're pear-shaped puffballs is what they're called. But yeah, the big ones I have to go to the Okanagan. So drier areas will have them, but we don't really have them. Yeah.
I had a question. How do you dry the puffballs?
That's a question for you again. I don't work, like I said, I've eaten puffballs raw. I've fried them on the fire sort of thing, but I haven't dehydrated them.
Yeah, I use them. I have a dehydrator. I use them. I strongly recommend, and I'm sure my wife would too, that you put your dehydrator outside when you're going to be dehydrating them. I did about 4 days of dehydrating them indoors, and the smell took like 4 months to get rid of. So she was not too pleased. So yeah, you can for those, because they're giant puffballs, obviously, I essentially just cut them as pretty much big steaks. I mean, for those who haven't seen a giant puffball before, I mean, they can be about a foot in diameter. They're pretty large. They can be even larger. I believe one of the records actually right now is from the Ottawa Valley. I think I saw it not too long ago, and the picture I saw was probably about 3 feet in diameter. It was the mushroom. It was a monster. Anyway, just absolutely absurd, one of these mushrooms. But so yeah, you just essentially can grab a very long knife and slice them into big steaks and dry them like that. And if they're the small puffballs, I mean, I don't dry the small puffballs. They're too small to be worthwhile. I mean, I prefer to just kind of toss them into whatever I'm cooking, if I'm eating them at all. They're not really my they're not my go-to mushroom. Let's put it that way. I prefer the porcini or the chanterelle.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Okay. While you're in the woods, I figure I should ask this. It's actually a question that's on the Think Fungi website. It kind of asks all the people who kind of join Think Fungi, this one question kind of to introduce themselves to the group, and it's what your favorite foraging memory is. So someone who's spent a lifetime foraging, I feel like you might have quite a few memories, but do you have a favorite?
I mean, there's a ton, but I mean, the one that really always comes to mind, because I think I remember the photo of me and my friends in the forest. So matsutake, so our pine mushroom that we have out here, which is extremely aromatic, beautiful white mushroom that can get quite large, but they're elusive. And it was my first matsutake hunt, and I went out with a bunch of friends, and we found enough to like fill us. So we just would pick. It's like a treasure. I mean, any mushroom picking, it's like a treasure hunt, right? So yeah, I have so many memories of like just collecting tons and bringing them home, and then trying all the different recipes and dehydrating and freezing and whatever with friends and sharing them. It's kind of simple, but yeah, that was one of my favorite memories.
Oh, no, that's fair enough. I mean, I think pretty much all my favorite memories are also just, being in the woods with other people, right? I mean, it's just fun. It's fun to do the scavenger hunt with others, or the treasure hunt,
Yeah, and I mean, as you as someone I've been teaching mushroom foraging programs for about a decade now, and there's still new mushrooms out there, so there's still ones that I'm still learning about, so that's really fun too. It's just knowing that your journey sort of never ends, as far as delicious that maybe only a few people have eaten them too. That's always interesting too.
Yeah. Okay, well, I suppose we're going to let you go and continue doing your foraging over in the woods.
Yep. Can I pitch one thing?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
If anyone is out here in Vancouver or coming to Vancouver on June 10th and 11th, we have a forest dinner. So we're going to be foraging on in a UBC research forest, basically, and collecting and then serving a 7-course in the woods at the lake. So that's going to be really fun. So yeah, just check the Swallowtail website if you want to come out on any of the pop-up restaurants that we have coming up, or yeah, come out and fall for mushroom foraging with us. It's the best time of year.
Yeah, I just shared the website and Instagram. There's also the Facebook at Swallowtail Canada. So I definitely recommend to people to check out, those various sites of yours. Follow her. Obviously, you can book a spot on the foraging trips or a seat at the dinner, as she just mentioned. There's courses as well that you can sign up for. And yeah, is there anything else, Robin, before we let you sign off? No, all good.
Nice talking to everyone.
All right. Thank you so much, Robin.
Okay, see you.